Lock all doors if possible, and
I can't see the slime.
tell your children goodbye, and do whatever you need to do before the end.
You want to know what mythical story always really freaked me out when I was little?
No.
Well, I'll tell you anyways. Medusa. I don't know why it left me feeling unnerved when I first heard about the story. This lady with snakes for hair, and any type of eye contact will leave you turned to stone. Obviously, once I got older and actually got to know the true story, my fears lessened as it's actually quite the tragic tale. But it seems like these days you don't really hear about this character anymore. In fact, the only time I believe I've seen her brought to life in film would be in VHS 99, where she appears to torment a group of teenagers and punish them for being, well, you know how the characters are in the VHS series.
Shower time.
Let's go. Finally, bro, my balls are about to discover a new shade of blue.
Why do I bring up Medusa, you may be asking? Well, this analog horror series I stumbled upon seems to involve some similarities. Stone Cold.
Stone Cold Creamy Cream.
I'm not too sure what to make of this analog horror just yet, but all I know is that there is something called the Medusa Virus, and eye contact with infected individuals is something you're going to want to avoid. Stone Cold was created by the channel Mythical Films, and if you haven't already, be sure to check out the original series before joining me on covering this journey. So let's not waste any more time, and get right into this potential nightmare. But before I let you get too far, just wanted to say if you're new here and enjoy what you're watching, be sure to hit all those neat buttons down below as it really helps support the channel. And if you want to see more, be sure to follow us on Instagram and Letterboxd. Alright, now you can pass through. Stone Cold, Entry 1. Our series begins with some various clips from older footage. Right off the bat, we get a very brief distortion on the footage, blacking out everybody's eyes. It doesn't take long, however, for an emergency broadcast to take over, specifically at the request of the White House. Must be something very important.
I've come to make an announcement. Shadow the Hedgehog's a bitch-ass motherfucker.
We learn that there have been multiple reports of these things called demon eyes, and it's already taken its fair share of lives. Due to this, it really seems like they have resorted to straight up executing whoever is contaminated.
With severe losses among our ranks, we have resorted to cleansing the contaminated of our country.
During the broadcast, we quickly cut away and see as a couple people are being pulled away on stretchers, likely victims of those demon eyes. As of this moment, it's been labeled the Medusa Virus, and you guessed it, you contract it by making direct eye contact with someone who is infected.
The Medusa virus is spread through direct, sustained eye contact with the infected persons.
Since this appears to be a brand new disease, no tests have been done yet in efforts to cure or even understand the virus at large. Seems like that'd be top priority, wouldn't you think? So what can we do as citizens? Well, it sounds like we have to refrain from using telephones, unless it's an emergency. However, it's said to not use the phones to call for help if you are literally about to be killed by an infected person. I feel like that counts as an emergency. Anyways, we are then told to lock all doors, blind all windows, and stay inside. If you manage to find yourself close by to someone infected, just look down and move along. So it sounds like infected parties aren't necessarily violent, but it's just incredibly easy to also get infected if you even glance at them. Basically, we're just going to have to avoid any and all human interaction. Something interesting to note is that our narrator says to not attempt to blind yourself. I mean, I understand why you wouldn't want to do that, but would that also not keep you safe? We're then brought to the varying stages of the Medusa virus. It sounds like if you are infected, you go through all the stages rather quickly, until you get to the final stage, which sounds like the virus's endgame. Stage 1 is contamination through eye contact. At this point, the eyes and the area surrounding will start to swell, and pupils will expand abnormally large. If you aren't paying close attention to people around you, it sounds easy to miss. However, not all hope is lost. As it's said, if you are in this stage of the infection, removing your eyeballs surgically will halt the virus. I thought we heard earlier that blinding ourselves wasn't an option. I suppose stabbing your eyes out and getting them surgically removed are two different ways to go about it. But if these stages are as quick as they say, I don't think anyone would have time to run to the hospital before it's too late. Stage 2 is muscle loss. This leaves the infected permanently blind in the eyes, and this will also result in extreme pain and near paralysis. At this point, all bets are off and a potential cure is no longer an option. Stage 3 is the final stage. It takes only 35 seconds once this stage is reached to achieve full paralysis from the head down, and it's reported that all the infected do is angle their heads towards people and make quiet whimpering sounds. It did say earlier not to attempt to help these people, and our next slide tells us that studies believe these to be calls for help. However, you still should stay far away. It's also speculated that patients will hear loud What is wrong with me today? It's also speculated that patients will hear loud voices in their head, and before paralysis strikes, will start screaming very loudly. In certain cases, the eyeballs will actually explode. To end off this entry, our narrator seems to go off script a little bit and ends us off on quite the grim message.
As we speculate, there is no long-term solution or returning to normal life. Tell your children goodbye, and do whatever you need to do before the end. This is the final goodbye.
This is the final goodbye, he says. I mean, given what we learned about this virus already, I'd say it's bound to spread like an absolute wildfire. Our only options are to stay indoors and just avoid people. Sounds like a dream come true if I'm being honest. Redolence. Entry 2. The first thing we see in this entry is through a security camera from a couple houses. Everything seems normal until you see in the distance someone strolling along the sidewalk. Are they infected? Who knows, but it's very dangerous to be out like that. We are then brought to a report from the National Virology Lab, and we learn that these reports were submitted by a Dr. Angler, which is quite a scary name for a doctor. We then cut to some POV footage of someone walking along the road. Is this our character we saw in the very beginning? Who's to say, but we quickly come back to the reports. Turns out we may have been misinformed about a couple of things. The cause for the eyeball swelling up is actually due to the virus moving through the bloodstream, traveling towards the brain and face. We then return to our walking character, who seems to be moving at a bit of a slower pace than before. Back to Dr. Angler, and we learn a little bit more about this infection. It's believed that eye contact with infected activates something within the amygdala, which is basically the brain's emotional processing unit, seemingly activating a fight-or-flight response as it's sensing a threat. This, in some way, shape, or form, is allowing the virus to enter the body without the immune system noticing. I mean, if it's going through the eyes, our immune system doesn't know about those guys anyway. He later describes the corpses they will be doing tests on as frozen. Sounds like this virus literally has Medusa-like effects. You contract it through eye contact, and then freeze up in paralysis. So perhaps our walking character isn't infected, unless there's still something we don't know about. Speaking of our walking character, we return to them for a little bit as they continue on their journey. But Dr. Angler has more to report. What he has to report is basically the fact that they are continually having trouble finding anything out about this virus. It seems like we know as much as these scientists do, which isn't frightening at all. When we get to his next report, we actually get an update. It's not a very hopeful one, but it's an update. Turns out there has been a new mutation of this virus, one that's lighter than the previous strain and has evolved to transmit through the air. Humanity is definitely doomed if that's the case. The virus also seems to have a mind of its own, as it can basically go wherever it wants. It's in full control of the direction it floats. We quickly cut away from our report as it sounds like another doctor in the room accidentally inhales the gas.
Symptoms are not confirmed to be the same.
Dr. Angler, I've inhaled it. The seal wasn't gas-proof.
Our next segment takes us to another emergency alert. We have to update the public on this new airborne mutation. Now we also have to keep our air vents closed, so we're just supposed to suffocate from within our homes. The only good thing I suppose is that this airborne virus isn't necessarily invisible, but it can be seen as a thick orange gas. At least we know what to avoid then. Luckily, it also sounds like the government is going to provide special AC units that can filter out this gas, so we won't have to suffocate from inside. We're told once again to keep doors, windows, and now vents locked. However, once it gets to what we have to do when we're outdoors, it doesn't sound very good. We end up getting some actual tips besides just suffocating, and that's to quickly head indoors while covering your eyes and face. Hopefully you know where you're going. If you end up inhaling the gas, it will basically give you feelings of nostalgia and you will lose self-control. Interestingly enough, infected individuals will perpetually smell the gas and will walk aimlessly towards the scent, which oddly enough smells like pie and cake. You're basically a cartoon character following the trails of a delicious apple pie, except instead of apple pie, you are met with a deadly disease. This gives us an answer as to our mysterious character who did nothing but walk along. He's definitely infected with this new strain. It's also said victims may be stuck replaying sad memories in their heads. So basically, if you inhale some of the gas, You will be forced to keep walking through more of the gas until you have gotten enough in your system to be infected with the first variant of the Medusa Virus, which, you know, freezes you up and makes your eyes explode. We then return to our original walking character, who is now in the middle of nowhere, and in the distance we can hear what sounds like someone crying. Is this our main character crying, or someone else? It did say that you will replay a bunch of sad memories, so this may be why they are stuck crying. Our character then stops moving altogether, like fully succumbing to infection and becoming paralyzed, just when we thought this virus couldn't get any worse. It's interesting how this whole series seems to be focusing on just the existence of this virus. If something like this were to happen in real life, there would be no hope at all. At first, all you had to do was avoid eye contact, so going outside was at least possible, but risky. Now it acts in the form of some thick gas that has full control of where it wants to go, so even if you're inside, you aren't fully safe. Sirens in the Sky, Entry 3. Our entry begins with a video presented by the FBI, the fundamentals of double-action revolver shooting. This seems to be a video teaching you about how to shoot birds out of the sky, but these flocks are referred to as being infected. Are you telling me the birds have now contracted this virus? At this point, we're told our weapon of choice when dealing with larger infected birds is a shotgun. We're gonna have a bunch of crazy people shooting shotguns directly into the sky at this point. It's said that this infection causes the birds to scream abnormally, and this scream creates strange sound waves that drives whoever hears it absolutely insane, almost hypnotizing the person to go outside to silence the sound. However, doing so puts you at risk of inhaling the gas. Luckily, we cut away before they almost straight up play us the sound. Whose idea was that? Unfortunately, the censorship of the audio fails, and when we watch the footage, we hear all the screaming. Sounds like we have a birdemic on our hands. Interrupting our footage is yet another emergency broadcast from the White House, informing the public about the fact the Medusa virus can now infect any type of bird. Now it's said to lock our doors and literally throw away the key. This makes sense honestly, because as we have learned, hearing the sound the birds make will make you instinctually run outside. Hearing it will activate the flight or fight I typed flight or flight. Hearing the sound will activate the flight or fight response and you will basically be out of control, making you run outside to try to eliminate the threat. And then wouldn't you know it, you've inhaled the dangerous gas. Our footage ends up cutting out abruptly and we are met with cryptic messages. Lock yourself in before the angels take you. Your screams will be drowned by the sound of the sirens in the sky. Losing control of your body and mind is immediate. Ignore the vultures cleaning meat off the bones of the dead. To end off this entry, we get a brief message narrated by a little girl, really showing what life must be like in this borderline apocalyptic scenario.
One must really learn to live less. I miss the flying grasshoppers. I'm missing my friend who looks into the wrong eye. I can't see the sky anymore.
Something interesting to note is that these birds are referred to as the sirens in the sky. For those unaware, sirens are another creature in Greek mythology, like Medusa. Sirens, as most people imagine, are evil mermaids, who produce a song so beautiful that the men who hear it become entranced, wanting to continually go closer and closer to the song, to which they are then killed. How they kill people is pretty up in the air. Either sailors jump off their boats and drown, or they are so enthralled by the music, they stay with the sirens until they rot away from starvation. However, they weren't always depicted as these half-women, half-fish creatures, but come to find out, back before that time, they were actually depicted as half-women, half-bird creatures. You see the connections? Now, it's obviously unclear if these birds are legit sirens, but the way they operate truly match that of the depictions they had back in Greek mythology. And given the name of the channel being Mythical Films, I don't think this is too much of a stretch to draw parallels between the two. Who knows? Maybe some supernatural force is at play here, whose abilities oddly match that of those in ancient mythos. Nice to Eat You, Entry 4. This entry is definitely quite different than the ones we previously saw. We begin with more security footage outside this random home, until we cut to inside, and take a more cinematic approach. We see off a newspaper that there has been a nationwide food shortage, which makes sense considering no one can leave their house for any reason at this point. We also see as someone sits at their desk typing away at their computer. However, they get a desktop notification that motion has been detected outside the door. Turns out this whole segment is animated, I honestly thought this was live action until we got a closer look at our character. He gets up and begins to head towards the front door, hopefully with no plans to open it. He ends up actually opening the door to look around outside, which was incredibly foolish given the situation at hand here. He comes back inside, and it certainly sounds like he isn't alone anymore. His phone rings, and we end up cutting to this conversation between Bill and Martin. Bill is calling to inform him about the food shortages. It sounds like even the food has now been contaminated. Humanity is definitely over. Bill also lets him know that the government is getting extra strict on telephone usage, probably due to everyone trying to make phone calls all at once. Something to note is that our first entry had us in the late 90s, and in this entry, it seems like we are brought right to the modern day. How humanity has lasted this long at this point is beyond me. Our character, now known as Martin, goes back to his computer and sees he got an email from Bill, linking an article related to the food shortages. Something interesting we can see is another article off to the side, telling us that our Dr. Angler has just died in the hospital. Poor guy. We also learn how the virus is affecting the food. Officials from the English police have confirmed many sightings of a strange black sludge, which seems to limit crop lifespan, and it's unclear if it's even safe to touch. We now also know that this virus is worldwide now, with reports of people resorting to cannibalism in Thailand. Great, now it's a zombie outbreak. However, we are quickly interrupted by the security system, alerting of someone breaking in through a window. Martin quickly runs out to his living room, but nothing seems to be there. He ends up checking another end of his house, and sure enough, we have an infected break-in. At this point, it looks like Martin has already made the mistake of making eye contact, and there's nothing for him left to do but face the virus. Interestingly enough, however, this variant of the infected seems to actually be aggressive, as he lunges towards Martin, seemingly killing him. Something I really like here is that even though it's animated, the environments are still pretty realistic looking. Sure, the guy's movements are clearly 3D animated, but the way the shots are set up shows our creator knows a good bit of shot composition and how to make this whole segment cinematic, even keeping our character frequently in the dark so that it doesn't take us out of the moment to see a clearly CGI'd human. This tape was also a nice change of pace, taking us into the house of an actual person trying to survive through this global pandemic. You can get that sense of isolation as the world surrounding us is just empty at this point. Cold Shoulder, final entry. We're brought to a different character this time, someone sitting on the couch watching their cartoons, probably a child. The cartoons end up getting interrupted by our favorite emergency broadcast system. The broadcast begins and we find out we are still trying to get a cure or vaccine in working order, and over 3/4 of the world's population has been infected already. We're facing extinction at any moment. We then hear from a new doctor, and wouldn't you know it, a new strain has been discovered with a whole new set of symptoms. This time, it's described as a cold sensation that can be felt around the neck and the chest area, as if someone threatening is standing right behind you. However, this time, paralysis occurs much slower than the previous strain. This could be the strain of infected that was on our intruder, who attacked Martin in the last entry. We then hear a different narrator come from the TV, with some even more bad news.
As per recent discoveries conducted by drainage professionals, the Medusa virus has found its way into our ventilation and drainage.
The Medusa Virus gas has now managed to travel through our drainage systems, and those fancy new AC units the government provided are no luck anymore, as it can also get through those now. What's frightening about this message is that there are moments where even the narrator knows there is nothing some of these people can do, except just wait until the virus gets in and kills them. And all Our Lady on the broadcast can do is just apologize to those who can't be helped.
If a thick orange gas seems to seem from any drainage, be sure to cover your mouth and tell your children goodbye. I'm sorry.
We end up cutting to a different area of the house, and we see as it appears like someone just standing still, likely already infected and frozen stiff. We can then hear those muffled cries coming from the infected. And in a frightening turn of events, we get our first head-on look at an infected, with the eyeballs already exploded, leaving nothing but black voids in their place. Is this our person who was watching the TV in the beginning? Seems like they were already dead when we started. I really like how in this tape we are presented with the emergency broadcast system in a different fashion. Instead of us just watching it head-on, we get a more outside look at the interruption taking over the TV. and the mere fact that so many people may be just dead on the couch already is very unnerving. Well, there you have it, folks. That was the finale of Stone Cold. This isn't the end of the series as a whole just yet, however, as there are 2 more videos a part of a sequel series called Stone Cold Zero, but that will have to be covered another day. I gotta say, I really enjoyed Stone Cold. I like how this world honestly has no hope within it, and I kinda think there has to be something otherworldly at play here. The fact that this virus acts exactly like a real-life Medusa, and the fact that the birds act just like sirens, makes me believe that there is something outside of our comprehension going on. It would explain how any effort to construct a cure is just met with failure, as there is literally nothing that can be done to combat this pandemic, and that any time it seems like scientists come up with a way to slow down the virus, it quickly is able to overcome the obstacle and make matters even worse. This world that's been created is just so full of dread, and you can watch as humanity is very quickly being wiped off the face of the earth. As the days go on, this virus just becomes more and more threatening, to the point where it seems like all we can do is accept the fact that we are doomed. Obviously, we don't know if humanity manages to prevail, as we still have Stone Cold Zero as a continuation. This series honestly reminded me of the Smile tapes we covered not so long ago, a mysterious virus seemingly unbeatable taking the streets, and threatening humanity as a species. So if you haven't already, I can definitely recommend you give Stone Cold a shot. That'll be about it for this video. If you made it all the way to the end, I thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to keep leaving me recommendations down below, whether it be in the YouTube comments or the community Discord, where I always stay on high alert. But if you'll excuse me, I gotta follow wherever this pie smell is coming from.